Well, hello, Miss Lily. Here we go. Whoa! Got a party in the house. How is everybody doing? Got a party in the house. Everybody doing all right? We're ready for some double crossed. Some double crossed. I'm ready to go. Who all we got on here tonight? How's everybody doing? Why is this crazy? I guess. There's my people. Hello, Mari. Hola, Mari. Te quiero. I hope you get feeling better, baby girl. And they loves you. Ooh, we got a Karen. Hello, Miss Karen. I think are you new to this? I don't remember seeing you before. Lenore, I haven't seen you in a while, darling. Hello, Miss Sonia. Miss Jamie. Nina. Hey, Reese. No. Internet being down's not good. How is everybody? Hello, James. Welcome. Welcome. Man, I got a house full tonight. And Miss Vincy and Miss Crimson. Are y'all ready for some double crossed? Ooh, we got a house full going on tonight. That's the way, I like it, I have a house full of people tonight, and I'm in here doing this. Yay! I have my 16-year-old niece and her 2-year-old brother. Oh, and I'm 47. I'm too old to be doing this with babies. It's his daddy's fault. And they from the same mom and daddy, too. It ain't the second time around. This is the same mom and daddy. Whew. Alrighty, we got double trouble, double crossed, taken, book two by Miss K.L. Ramsey. You guys like K.L.? She's a pretty good old gal, I reckon. Just don't tell her I said so. I don't think she's on here yet. K.L. There we go. There we go. There we go. Okay. So. Save that. Then I can go back. Lord, I'm looking like my mama the older I get. Okay, who's in the house? Oh, I ain't want to talk to you. Oh. Well, that's what. You on her team, not me, sister. You find her. Are you in the mood to party, Vincy? Okay. I've had chicken again tonight, and I'm about tired of chicken. I'm kind of chickened out, y'all. Hello, Miss Nicole. Miss Laura. Okay. So, boop, boop, boop. We have 3 characters. Ooh, West, Nash, and Ellie. Oh, Tank and Quinn must be from the next one. West, Nash, and Ellie. Who on here likes reverse harem? Reverse harem. I say harem. Reverse harem. Oh. Nathan! Are you naked, Nathan? You got to be naked to watch me. Because I can't be naked. I'm just kidding. Chris is not here. Chris would be naked. Yes. Yes. RH. I love it, Lenora, don't you? Is that little... I keep saying Lenora, but it's... Leonera? Leonera? How do you say your name, darling? Because I just glanced and was calling you Lenora, but that's not right. Okay. You can let me know when you hear it. Oh, and it's got a sexy red head for me. Oh, my belly. For some reason, my belly's hurting tonight. Leonora. Okay. Can you gargle like... Have you ever gargled like salt water or for like a sore throat or like a mouthwash or something? That's all I'm doing. If you know how to gargle, that's all I'm doing is just vibrating the back of my tongue. See, a lot of people go at the front of their tongue against their teeth. I don't. It's back here in the back. That's all I do. The guys love it. So, yeah. So, that's exciting, huh? I'm off to work tomorrow. Yes. Another 3-day weekend. Whoop, 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 whoop. Bow wow. Actually had a... Make sure that door's shut. Actually had a guy one time that was... I purred during some stuff. It scared him off. He never came. After that, he broke up with me or whatever. Men are weird. They think they want the wild and crazy. Did you get it? Nathan, did you get the job? The guys are really weird and crazy. They say they want all this stuff, and then you know, they're okay with this and they're okay with that, and then you start and they're like, I find guys are not near as wild and crazy as women are. And I'll just leave that at that. Okay, so I put my contacts back in because I have a 2-year-old in the house and I didn't want to break my expensive glasses. So I have readers back on my head. I don't know what I'm going to end up having to do. Nina, there is nothing normal about you. And congratulations, Nathan. Is it a seasonal thing or is it a, I call bullshit too. Is it a seasonal thing, Nathan, or is it a for good, for sure thing? I would think so too, because I'm all about it. All right, we're not going to wait on KL. She may join us, she may not. Nina's on her pimping team, so she can help me out with some of the, if I have anything. So, what we're going to read tonight is Double Crossed, Taken, Book 2 by KL Ramsey. So, see this gorgeous redhead in the front? Yes. I love that cover, Kaya. The author is in the house. Ms. Ramsey is now in the house. Okay, so we're getting ready to start. And we're just going to start at the beginning and quit when I decide we need to quit. Because that's what I do. So, prologue. Miss Ellie. Oh, by the way, there's two guys in here in this book. It's Ellie, West, and Nash. So, let's see what kind of voices I can come up with tonight, Miss Vincy. You're going to love these, aren't you? Okay, so, here we go. I'm going to be able to read better without my glasses. Okay. Ellie stood in the small, dark closet, almost afraid to move. She couldn't see anything, including her best friend, Nash. She heard his breath hitch when her arm accidentally brushed his, telling her he was just as nervous about all of this as she was. Ellie tried to remember the exact moment she lost her mind and agreed to join Nash in the closet to play 7 Minutes in Heaven. It probably has something to do with the fact he called her a chicken and double dog dared her. Nash Lewis knew exactly how to push all her buttons, and now she was standing with him, hoping like heck he'd make a move and kiss her while praying he didn't. At 16, Elliot Hale knew she was behind the other girls in her class. Elliot Hale knew she was behind the other girls in her class with the whole liking boys thing, but she had more important things to do. Plus, boys seemed to ignore smart girls, and she was the smartest girl in her class. Nash had always been there for her best friend since birth, and she was pretty sure the feelings she was now experiencing for him were completely normal. At least she hoped they were. She really didn't have anyone to ask since her mother died when she was just 5. Her father had thrown himself into his work and didn't seem to have time for silly questions. Ellie took a wild guess that liking boys and what to do with them qualified as a silly question. Ellie girl, we don't have to do anything, Nash soothed. He always knew what she needed before she did. He was her calming force, the person she could always turn to in a crisis. The one person she could count on being there for her even on her darkest days. I know, Nash, but you know how I feel about being dared to do something, she protested, stomping her foot for full effect. She almost wanted to giggle when she brought her foot down on top of his, causing Nash to quietly curse. You know, she dramatically whispered, no one can hear you in here. No one can hear you in here, right? Nash, always the moral compass of the group. He hardly ever swore, and he did. And when he did, he usually muttered curses that didn't reach most people's ears, except hers. She was always by his side, and when Nash let loose a little, she thought it was the best thing ever. I know you hate to be dared, Elliot, but could you please try not to break my foot? I dared you because I knew Brandon Ferris was going to ask you to play with him, and he was bragging to all the other guys he was going to try to French kiss you. Ellie could feel herself make a face, but knew Nash couldn't see her. Still, he chuckled. You made that face, didn't you? He asked. No, she lied. Sure you did, Ellie girl. You always make that face. You know the one where you squinch up your nose when you don't like something, like when they serve tuna melts for lunch, but you were hoping for pizza? His analogy made her giggle again. Nash fumbled in the dark, trying to find her hand. He took it in his, and for a split second, Ellie held her breath, waiting for him to make the next move. But he didn't. Nash just stood there, holding her hand, and she was pretty sure he was the sweetest boy she'd ever known. Nash, she whispered, leaning into his body. Are you going to kiss me? She asked. His breath hitched, and she was sure he was going to tell her no. Do you want me to kiss you, Ellie? He asked. I'm not sure, she admitted. I've never been kissed before, she whispered. Admitting that out loud made her feel foolish. But she knew she could tell Nash anything, and he'd never make fun of her. Nash reached up and felt for her face, running the pad of his thumb over her bottom lip as if trying to decide his next move. "Yes," he whispered, and before she could get another word out, he sealed his mouth over hers. The kiss was gentle and sweet, just like Nash, and when he shyly poked his tongue into her mouth, she gasped. Nash dropped his hand, and her face took a step back from her face and took a step back from her, making her instantly regret her overreaction. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I wasn't sure what to do." God, she sounded like an idiot, but her honesty was all she had left. Ellie had already run completely out of any of her self-control when it came to Nash, because everything he had just done to her only made her want more. "Bye, darling." "It was okay then?" he shyly asked. "It was more than okay," she confirmed. "In fact, I'd like to try it again," she said. This time Nash didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms and quickly found her lips. Ellie wrapped her arms around his neck like she had seen women do in the movies, and part of her seriously thought about popping out her leg, but she thought it might be a little overkill. Nash kissed her for what seemed like an eternity, but in reality, it was just a few short minutes. When the other kids pulled the door open to find them still kissing, she wanted to run and hide, but Nash told them all to grow up. She had to admit she liked the rebellious new Nash. He grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the small coat closet and up the basement stairs. "Nash," she said, blinking against the harsh sunlight that filtered down into the dark basement, "where are we going?" He didn't stop pulling her up the stairs. "I'm not giving Brandon the opportunity to have his chance with you, Ellie. You kissed me, and now you're my girl. Brandon Ferris will just have to find his own." Ellie smiled at the way Nash called her his girl. She was his girl and probably would be forever, as long as that might be. Present day. Elliot Hill had spent the better part of the day hiking up the mountain outside of town, and she was about ready to turn around and hike back down. She wanted to laugh at herself because she knew that wasn't an option. Really, her only hope was to find Nash Lewis, and she also knew he might turn her away once she found him. They had left things between them on the best of terms when he moved to the top of the mountain. Really, Ellie couldn't blame him for being angry with her still. She acted like a child when he announced he was going to take some time for himself and go off the grid. Nash decided to move up to his cabin in the middle of nowhere, and Ellie worried she would never see him again. Her fears were silly, really. They had been best friends since she could remember, and she should have known better. Oh, by the way, I don't know how long Miss Author... Oh, she's still here. Miss KL don't like to hear her own stuff read, so she might not stick around. Just remember she told me that on one particular Saturday. Instead of a going away party, Ellie threw a fit when Nash left. Despite her childish display, he had checked in with her weekly. It was usually by text, but she was grateful for every message that told her he was alive and well. And for the most part, her life had continued back in town. Sans one best friend, but she was miserable without him. Not that she would admit to him. She was a criminal defense lawyer and damn good at her job, even if she did say so herself. She represented some high-profile cases in her almost 10 years of practicing law, but the one she was on now was the worst. She had the distinct pleasure of representing William Keller, and if she had to guess, he was the trouble who was following her. Well, the person he hired to go after her, since he was still safely tucked away in his jail cell just last time she checked. Keller was doing time for human trafficking and had hired her firm to prove his innocence. Since she was not a partner of the firm, the unwanted caseloads had often trickled down to her, and she was the unlucky recipient of Keller's case. She was sure he was guilty and even asked to be rescued from the case, but the judge refused, telling her to just do her job. When she had to face Keller alone again at the penitentiary to go over a few details, he told her he was informed she asked to be taken off the case. The only way he would have found that out was from the judge, and that told Ellie all she needed to know. She was in way over her head. Keller's threat was overkill. She knew exactly what was going to happen to thousands of women and children if she did win the case, and she wasn't sure which outcome would be worse. When she got home that evening to find her place had been broken into and vandalized, she knew calling the local police would be pointless. She had a feeling the case was bigger than just her involvement, and she worried Keller and his business associates would have more than a dirty judge on their payroll. The only person she could think to turn to was Nash. She ditched her phone, knowing it was probably bugged, and packed her backpack, only to disappear into the woods that joined her little town and the mountain her best friend lived atop. Ellie wasn't being overly dramatic when she thought of Nash being her only hope. He was just that. She just hoped she could get to him before whoever was threatening her caught up to her. West. Just for those that's never read KL's stuff before, she doesn't write in chapters. She writes from point of views. So every time, like, West is another guy. There's Ellie, who's the girl, and then Nash, who's the guy who's her best friend. And then now we're looking at West. He's going to be the other guy in there. Remember? Reverse harem. Jake Weston knew he was taking a chance tracking Elliot Hale up the mountain, since he had no idea where she was headed. When he found out she was going to the prison to visit Keller earlier, he took his chance to search her home. But she came back before he could finish, and he had no choice but to hide out and then follow her up the damn mountain. What he really wanted was his nice warm bed and possibly a beer or two. But that wasn't going to happen anytime soon. The FBI didn't give a fuck about what he wanted or his own comfort. They wanted information on Keller, and if his hunch was correct, Elliot Hale knew a hell of a lot more than she was letting on. Once he realized she was leaving, sneaking up one of the trails that would lead her out of town, he had no choice but to leave his warm car and follow her. The problem was, he wasn't dressed for the impending storm as she was. West was freezing his ass off, and he hoped she'd either get to where she was going soon or turn around and hike back to town. The last thing he wanted to do was wait out the snowstorm that was raging on around him. Near whiteout conditions were making it too damn hard to continue, but he also knew turning back wouldn't be any easier. His only option was to hope Miss Hale knew where she was going, and he could come up with a fucking good excuse as to why he was trailing her if he got caught. West had managed to stay back out of her sight, but he worried if the snow kept coming down, his dark jacket was going to give him away. He stuck out like a sore thumb, and every time Elliot Hale turned around, he was sure she was going to see him. His feet were freezing since the trail was completely covered at least a few inches of snow that had quickly fallen. West stumbled forward, tripping over a rock and stumbling down to the ground. He lay there for a minute, hoping he didn't make enough of a ruckus to warrant attention. Just when he thought it was safe to get back up, Elliot Hale stood over him, and he knew his cover had been blown. It was a fight or flight time, and with the way his ankle throbbed, he was pretty sure neither would work well in his favor. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she gushed. West tried to nod and wave her attention off, but he failed miserably. Instead, the pretty brunette had her arms around him, trying to help him up from the cold, wet ground. Fine," he growled, even though his fucking ankle screamed otherwise. "I was just out hiking, and this storm came up out of nowhere. I'm not really dressed for a snowstorm. I was trying to make it down the mountain, but I got turned around, and now I'm afraid I'm lost." "My friend's cabin is up the path just a little further. Do you think you can make it?" The idea of getting close to Elliot Hale would make his job a whole lot easier, but he also stood the chance of blowing his cover if he was discovered. From everything he knew about Elliot Hale, she was smart, and he didn't want to take a chance. She'd figured everything out. The wind picked up around him, reminding Wes he had two choices: go with Miss Hale or stay on the side of the mountain and probably die. Either way, was a risk, but at least he'd have a fighting chance if he let her help him. Besides, judging from a determined look on her pretty face, there was no way she was about to leave him on the trail. "I can make it," he said. "Thank you." She pulled his arm around her neck and he held onto her as if she was his lifeline. "I'm Elliot Hale, by the way," she yelled over the howling winds, "but everyone calls me Ellie." "Jake Weston, but you can call me West," he offered. He learned from years of having secrets with the FBI to tell as many truths as possible so you don't get caught up in the lies. His name was probably the only truth he was going to be able to give to Ellie, but that was the nature of his work until he could find out just where he stood with Keller. He needed to be careful, and lying to his rescuer was his only option. Nash finished chopping the load of wood and carried it to his porch to stack. It felt like snow, and he was happy for the change in weather. It had been a warmer than usual fall, and he was hoping the snow would keep some of the nosy townies away. They were constantly hiking up his mountain and stumbling across his little cabin. He was ready for some true solitude, and he was hoping the impending storm might give him just that. After working all day to get ready for the snow, he decided to take a quick shower to warm up, and then he'd make himself a steak for dinner. He had earned it. He was just about to sit down to dinner when a quiet rapping at the door had the hairs on his neck standing on end. It had just started snowing, and Nash was sure he'd be stuck with whoever had the misfortune of knocking on his door. There was no fucking way he'd want to entertain a visitor until the storm passed. Mountain snow tended to linger and be harder to get through than the stuff they got down in town. The way the storm raged on the outside of his cabin, the snow was going to make getting back down the mountain damn near impossible. The second knock at the door was a lot louder and more insistent, telling him whoever was on the other side wasn't going to give up and leave. "I'm coming," he growled. He pulled the cabin door open to reveal two figures standing on the other side, and from the looks of them, they were freezing. The wind blew in a good deal of snow and made it near impossible to see who the people were. "Come in," he yelled into the wind. The two people entered his cabin, and he used all his body weight to push the front door closed. The smaller figure pulled her scarf free from her face and hid known those eyes anywhere. Ellie. "Fuck, Ellie, what are you doing out in the storm?" She smiled up at him, her cheeks bright red in the cold air and snow that pelted her face. Her smile was quickly replaced with worry as he pulled her in for a hug. "I need your help," she whispered against his neck. "Anything," he breathed. She looked at the man who pulled his jacket from around his face and shook her head. "Not now. Later. We can catch up later, and I'll fill you in about everything," she said. Her smile was back in place, but Nash knew Ellie well enough to know that something was bothering her. "This is Wes," she offered. "I found him on the mountain on my way to here. He apparently twisted his ankle when he tripped over a rock." Nash shot Ellie a disapproving look. "You just picked up a complete stranger and brought him to my cabin?" Nash questioned. Ellie's mouth gaped open. "You would have had me leave him there. He wasn't dressed for the storm, and I am not the kind of person to just leave someone to die, Nash Lewis." The way she chided him made him want to laugh. His Ellie was always a spitfire, but when she scolded him, it made him a little hot, though he'd never tell her that. "No, you're not, Ellie girl. You are the sweetest, most caring person I know, sometimes to a fault," Nash said. West held up his hands as if in defense. I'm not here to cause any trouble. I fell and Ellie was nice enough to save my ass. End of story. As soon as this storm is over, I can call for someone and for some help and be on my way, he offered. Nash gave a curt nod, knowing there was no other option. With the storm, they had no cell service. He could radio for help, but help wouldn't be able to get them before the storm broke. It's fine, Nash lied. I've known Ellie a damn long time, and there is no way she would have left you on the side of the mountain to die. It's just not in her. Nash noted the skepticism in West's eyes. Seems that way, he agreed. Anyway, I'm thankful to you both. No problem. Let's get you off that ankle, and I'll find you both some dry clothes and something to eat, Nash offered, helping Ellie off with her coat. It had been almost a year since he saw her. My Mike's having a conversation with a 2-year-old. You're welcome, darling. Have a good one. No problem. Let's get you off that ankle and I'll find you both some dry clothes and something to eat, Nash offered, helping Ellie off with her coat. It had been almost a year since he saw her, and his traitor's body still responded to her the way it always had. He needed to remind himself of all the reasons why the two of them just wouldn't work. The first and most pressing reason being his PTSD. She wasn't a good idea. Not since he was discharged from the Air Force for reasons he didn't like talking about. Not even to his best friend. Nash knew he could be everything Ellie was looking for. He wouldn't ever be able to give her the traditional lifestyle she deserved. A big house with a husband and kids. The whole 9 yards. That wasn't who he was, and that was another secret he was keeping from her. Honestly, it was a secret he had never told anyone because it never mattered before. He tried to be with Ellie, but a part of him longed for more, something that at the time seemed forbidden. That was why he joined the Air Force. He wanted to not only explore the world, but also who he was. For the first time in his life, Nash was able to date both men and women. Oh, fuck me sideways. This is getting ready to get good, ladies. Able to date both men and women, and it was freeing not to have to worry what everyone in his small town thought about his sexual preference or his lifestyle choices. It wasn't anyone's business who was in his bed. The only problem was he never stopped wishing it was Ellie. Thank you, Nash, she whispered. You never have to thank me, Ellie. I would do anything for you, he admitted. Well, just about anything, she corrected and winked at him. He wanted to chuckle, but there was nothing funny about having the woman he loved in his cabin and not being able to take what he wanted from her. Yeah, just not that, Ellie, he whispered as he walked into his bedroom. He knew she could hear him from her little gasp, but he didn't turn around, not wanting to see the hurt and disappointment on her face, because the one thing he couldn't do for her was love her. That would just be too much. Ellie wasn't sure what to make of Nash's denial. She knew the score. He didn't want her, not in the way he used to. They dated for their junior and senior years of high school, and everyone in town, including her, thought they would end up married with a few kids by now. Instead, at senior prom, Nash announced he was joining the Air Force, and 2 months after graduation, he was gone. He told her it was something he had to do. Ellie refused to say goodbye to him. Hell, she didn't let him officially break up with her, not wanting to face the truth she might never see him again. That thought was too painful to entertain. Instead, she graduated from college, and when Nash still didn't come home, she decided on law school. What did she have to lose by staying a few more years in school? She had already lost the boy she loved. He had left her, and the man who came home in his place was broken and secretive. Ellie knew Nash had been through something that was too horrific for him to talk about. She had heard about his accident while he was deployed. His helicopter went down during what was supposed to be a training drill. He was the only survivor, but that was all she knew. Nash refused to talk about it, and she never pushed. When he was in the hospital after the accident, Ellie was hopeful she would have her best friend back, but she never really got that. She saw glimpses of Nash, the old Nash who she loved as a young girl, but he quickly disappeared, retreating into the quiet man who spent countless days locked away in his room, refusing to accept his fate. When his therapy didn't move as quickly as Nash hoped, and they didn't know if he'd ever walk again, he refused to see her altogether. Ellie would show up at the hospital only to be turned away by Nash's nurses, and after a while, she lost hope. After he was released, she finally got up the nerve to question him, trying to push him out of his comfort zone a little. He told her he was moving up to his cabin and wanted to be left alone. He promised to keep in touch, and he had, but she missed him. Ellie didn't realize just how much until tonight when Nash pulled his cabin door open and ushered them in. Nash looked good. I'll bet a little wilder than she was used to. His dark hair was grown out and almost long enough to pull back. He had grown a beard, and she had to admit she saw the appeal. Oh. Ellie wondered how his beard would feel running along her belly and down to her bare thighs. He was her first everything. Love, the first boy to kiss her and take her virginity. They spent countless nights in the back of his pickup truck, cuddled under a blanket with the stars as their nightlights. Ellie shook her head, trying to rid herself of that mental image. She needed to remember why she had trudged up the mountain. She needed Nash's help. She was sure her life depended on it. Ellie quickly changed, pulling on the sweats Nash lent her, wanting to get back to the main room of the cabin before he interrogated the poor guy she found hurt on the side of the mountain. Wes seemed like a nice guy, but she wondered what he was doing out in the storm with so little clothing on. He must have not been a local. Most people around town knew to plan for bad weather and expect worse. He had on a light jacket and regular street shoes. People keep messaging me, and that one was weird. Okay. He had on a light jacket and regular street shoes. The poor guy was lucky she happened upon him when she did. Otherwise, she might have passed his frozen corpse on her way back down the mountain. There was no doubt she'd be headed back to town as soon as the storm passed. From the look on Nash's face, he wasn't thrilled about having company, and she hated how he seemed so distant. She knew bringing a stranger to his cabin wouldn't sit well with him, but she was being honest when she told Nash she couldn't leave Wes out in the storm. All dry? Nash asked, licking her body up and down when she appeared in the doorway between his bedroom and the main living room. The cabin was always one of her favorite places to sneak away to when they were kids. It had been in Nash's family for generations, and though she hadn't been up there in a while, it hadn't changed much over the years. Although she had to admit she was a fan of the indoor plumbing Nash must have added. When they were kids, there was just an outhouse, and she hated having to go out to use the bathroom outside. Yep, I have to say, I love the new bathroom, she said. Nash shrugged. I added it when I moved up here. I got sick of freezing my balls off in the outhouse. Plus, it's nice to be able to take showers now. Before I had to fill that old makeshift tub with boiling water, and it took forever to fill. Ellie giggled at the memory of just how many hours it took for him to heat and fill the tub for them when they would sneak up to the cabin for a few nights. Her father never really seemed to give a fuck where she was, so it was easy to make the excuse of being at a girlfriend's house for a few nights and hike up the mountain to be with Nash. I, for one, won't miss that house, she said. That thing was a breeding ground for spiders, she said. Nash barked out his laugh, and for just a minute she could see the sweet teenage boy staring back at her. He disappeared just as soon as Wes showed up from the other side of the cabin from the only spare room. Thanks for the dry clothes, ma'am, Wes said to Nash. Are you sure you don't mind letting me crash in your spare room? Where will Ellie stay? Alright, what the crap is this and why does it keep doing that? Frackers. No. Maybe that worked. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay. Nash's smile was easy. She can take my bed and I'll bunk on the sofa, Nash said. Ellie felt a pang of disappointment at his mention of sleeping on the sofa. She wanted to protest, but now wasn't the time. You two must be starving, Nash said. Sit and I'll grab a few more plates. I'm sure I can rustle up something to eat, he offered. Thanks, Nash, Ellie whispered. I'm sorry to put you out like this. Not at all. What are friends for? He brushed past her and Ellie shivered. She didn't know if it was from the contact of having his body so close to hers or if it was his icy tone. She wanted to shout at him, tell him they were well past being just friends, but he was right. All their years together, her believing he was forever, it was all lies. The black and white of it was they were just friends now, and Ellie was thankful he allowed her to be that for him, even if she wanted so much more with Nash. So, how do you two know each other then? West asked. Ellie turned to look the man over. He was still hobbling around, reminding her he had hurt his ankle, but he seemed more capable now that they were dry and safe in Nash's cabin. He was a little bigger than Nash, so the sweats he borrowed were snug against his body, showing off his muscular form and other things, I'm sure. She had to admit the gray sweatpants didn't do much to hide what West had going on, and Ellie found it hard to take her eyes off him. West snapped his fingers at her in an outrageous display, trying to get her attention. His sexy smirk let him know he was onto her, catching her checking him out, and who would blame her? He was a good-looking man with his blonde hair and sky blue eyes. He had a few days facial stubble going on, and honestly, she wanted to know what it would feel like rubbing all over her body. Ellie seriously needed to get herself in check. It had been a couple of years since she had a steady boyfriend, and apparently her trusty vibrator wasn't doing the job. And I lost it. There we go. She thought it was. Being in the small cabin with two seriously sexy men made her wet, needy, and entertaining every dirty thought that entered her overly active imagination. Thank goodness I didn't bring my 16-year-old niece in here to listen to me tonight. Whew. Problem, Ellie? Nash asked. She looked at him to find him watching her with the same knowing smirk on his face. He knew her too well to be able to lie. Ellie smiled back and shrugged. I was just thinking West is a little, bigger than you, I guess. Ellie tried to for casual, but the scowl on Nash's handsome face told her she had hit a nerve. Well, thanks for that, West teased. He chuckled and crossed his arms over his massive chest while Ellie looked him over again and heard from head to toe. West shook his head. You going to answer my question? Question? Ellie repeated. She wasn't sure she had even heard him speak, let alone ask a question. Ellie shook her head, trying to clear the lust-fueled fog that was threatening to take over her brain. Yes, Ellie girl, your new friend wants to know how we know each other, Nash growled. He sat down on the giant brown leather sectional that took up much of the cabin's main room. Nash didn't seem overly pleased he had a stranger in his home who was asking questions. She knew he liked his privacy. It was why he moved up the mountain from town, wanting to avoid the people who knew him best. She knew Nash had demons he needed to face down. She just wondered if he had ever been able to move and he'd ever be able to move back to town, or if that was... Man, why is everybody messaging me tonight? I declare. Okay. Ellie sat down next to him, their thighs touching, and Nash didn't make any effort to move. We've known each other our whole lives, she admitted. Nash's parents and mine were good friends, and they just kind of threw us together. I can't remember Nash not being there for me, Ellie whispered the last part, and he took her hand in his and smiled over at her. Me either, Ellie girl. I thought maybe you two are together, dating, Wes said, still standing by the doorway as if he wasn't sure he wanted to say or go. Ellie felt the pang of remorse, not making him feel more welcome, even if this wasn't her home. Nash could be a little off-putting, and she hated how Wes seemed to be on the receiving end of his foul mood. Oh my goodness, Wes, Ellie almost shouted. She stood and wrapped an arm around the big man's waist, pulling his arm around her shoulder. You need to get off that ankle. She helped him limp over to the end of the sectional, and he sat down. Thanks, he said. It's not as bad as I thought it was, probably just a light sprain. As soon as this storm passes, I'll be out of your hair, he said, mostly to Nash. Nash barked out his laugh. These mountain storms can last days, so it looks like the three of us might be stuck here for a bit. Ellie shot him a look, trying to tell him to be nice, and his sheepish grin told her he got her message loud and clear. But you both are welcome to wait out the storm here. It's not safe to go back until it blows over, Nash amended. I'm gonna grab you some ice, Ellie said to West. That should help with the swelling. Do you have some pain reliever, Nash? In the bathroom. I'll grab it, he offered. Ellie saw this as her opportunity to get Nash alone and hopefully fill him in a little. She knew the storm might buy her a little time, but whoever was after her would be coming. Ellie just wanted to be ready when that happened. She followed Nash back through the master bedroom to the small ensuite. He turned, shutting the door, backing her against it. Why the fuck are you here, Ellie? And what's with bringing a complete stranger to my home? Yeah, Nash was that angry with her, more than angry with her for invading his personal space, but she had no choice. I'm sorry about Wes, but I already told you I had no choice. I found him on the side of the mountain. If I would have left him in the storm, he'd be dead in a few hours. You saw how he was dressed, Nash. What would you have done? Nash didn't answer her, his breathing still ragged from his seething anger. Anyone else would have been afraid of Nash's temper, but Ellie knew better. Nash would never hurt her. You still haven't answered my question. Why are you here? Ellie sighed, not really wanting to spill her guts while a virtual stranger sat just steps away. Nash was giving her no choice, and she knew if she didn't tell him, he'd never let her out of the bedroom. I think I'm in danger, she admitted. Fuck, Nash barked. He snaked his arms out around her body and pulled him against him. Tell me what happened, he ordered Ellie. Always liked how Nash was a little bossy, especially in bed. But since he'd gotten out of the Air Force, his dominant nature was amped up to new levels. Ellie wondered what lengths he would go to now for control he always seemed to crave. She shivered against him, nuzzling her face into his arms, his warm neck. She always loved the way Nash smelled like the outdoors, now even more so. You smell nice, Ellie whispered against his skin, placing small kisses where she knew from experience he was most sensitive. Ellie, this won't work, and we both know it. He took a step back from her, and she instantly felt his loss. Fine, she spat. She was sick of the mixed signals Nash was constantly sending her. When he got back from the VA hospital after his accident, she was hopeful they would pick up where they had left off. But she was wrong. Nash treated her like a stranger, and they felt like a punch to the gut. She hated how cold and distant he had become. Occasionally, she could catch a glimpse of the old Nash, but he quickly put his walls back up and pushed her away. He would touch her and even hold her hand, but that was as far as she would get with him before he reminded her that they weren't together anymore. As if she needed him to say the words out loud. She felt his absence every lonely night she spent lying awake thinking about him, missing him. "I'm on this case," she began. It was best to just let Nash push her away and tell him why she was there. She needed his help, and if she pushed him, he might not be so willing to give it to her. "I'm representing William Keller. I can't tell you much more than that about the case, other than he is on trial for human trafficking, and I think he's trying to kill me." "What the fuck, Ellie?" Nash barked. "You seem to say that a lot around me, Nash. Remember when you didn't cuss around anyone but me? You've changed." She was teasing, but she meant what she said. Nash had changed, and she worried it would eventually destroy their friendship. "Yeah, I have. But I'm still the same guy who always had your back, Ellie." Hearing him admit that to her made her want to wrap him in her arms and remind him just what he had been to her, but she also knew Nash wouldn't allow that. "Thanks, Nash. I appreciate that. I have no one else to turn to. I think Keller has the local authorities on his payroll. I'm also sure he is paying off the judge who is overseeing his case. I tried to have myself removed as his lawyer, and I went home to find my apartment tossed. Nothing was missing, but I didn't want to take any chances that whoever did it wouldn't be coming back to finish the job. I grabbed my backpack and started for your cabin. That was when I found West." Nash eyed her suspiciously. "You're sure you weren't followed?" he asked. "As sure as I can be. The storm made it a little hard to check to see if anyone was behind me. I didn't see anyone else on the mountain until I stumbled across West," she admitted. "All right. I'll do what I can to help you, Ellie girl. Until we figure this out, you're staying with me." "I can't just hide away up here, Nash. I have to report to court when this storm blows over, or I'll be in contempt. The judge made that very clear when I tried to remove myself from the case." "Not a word about this in front of your new friend," Nash ordered. "I find it a little too convenient you just stumbled across him on your way up here. We need to find out some more about this guy." Ellie rolled her eyes and giggled at how bossy Nash was, but she had to admit his whole take-charge attitude had her a little hot and a whole lot bothered. "Yes, sir," she teased. Ellie noticed the way Nash's breathing hitched and the way his eyes roamed her every curve. She felt as though he was physically touching her with every look, and she couldn't help the way his traitorous body leaned into his. "No, Ellie." Nash opened the bathroom door and stepped past her. Ellie stood back against the wall, needing the extra support until she could get herself under control. She wasn't sure if running to Nash was a good idea yet or not, but her body seemed to think it was a fucking spectacular idea. She just needed to wrap her head around the fact that Nash didn't want her anymore, and someone needed to get the memo to her girl parts before they led her down a path she might not be able to come back from. West. West knew. I got all kinds of new people in here tonight. West knew if he didn't report into headquarters soon, they would send out a team to look for him, and it would possibly blow his cover. He had worked too long and too hard on the Keller case to have that happen. He worried getting close to his main suspect might not have been the best idea, but what choice did he have? He was hurt and knew if he stayed on the fucking mountain, his team would have found him frozen to death. The alternative of having to wrap his arm around sexy Elliot Hale wasn't such a bad one. She seemed sweet, but West knew all too well people weren't always what they seemed. He just hadn't planned on Nash Lewis being caught up in all this. Ellie was on her way to his cabin when she found him, and West wasn't sure how Ellie's old friend fit into everything. From the way they reacted to each other, they were much more than just the self-professed friends they claimed to be. He could tell they were past their point in their relationship, or at least they had been at some point. He needed to tread carefully with his questions since Ellie's friend seemed suspicious of him from the start. West just hoped Nash didn't try to stop him from bringing Ellie in if he found she was tied up with Keller. It would be a shame to mess up Nash's sexy face. West had always had a thing for men like Nash Lewis. He liked them growly, bossy, and completely fucking sexy. Nash was all those things wrapped up in one fine-ass package that had him wanting to do more than just ask him and Ellie questions. West had been in a committed threesome once. They lasted about a year, but then the man and woman he was with both decided it was time to kick him out of the relationship. He'd admit it hurt to be so easily discarded, but he was also thankful for their blatant honesty. He didn't want to wake up 10 years down the road to find he wasn't wanted in the relationship anymore. West walked away from them, wishing them well, and promised himself he would never get in the middle of an already established couple again. That was his folly and why he was so leery of Nash and Ellie's declaration that they were just friends. Not that he had fallen into bed with either of them. Elliot was a case for him, and he needed to work it and keep his dirty thoughts about fucking her and her friend to himself. Judging from the murderous expression on Nash's face, West was sure Ellie had followed him into his room to do more than talk. She quickly followed Nash into the kitchen and found an ice pack for his ankle. West knew better than to ask if she was all right when she handed him the bag of ice. He didn't need to be a rocket scientist to know she wasn't. It seemed the two friends had an argument, and he wondered if it had anything to do with him. "I'm going to bring in some more wood from the porch," Nash growled, pulling on his coat. He left, slamming the front door behind him, causing Ellie to jump. "Everything okay?" West asked. He knew they only had a few minutes for him to ask questions, and he wanted to take advantage of Nash's absence. "Yeah, I'll be fine. When you know someone as well as Nash and I do, you know how to push each other's buttons. Do you have someone like that in your life?" she asked. His hesitation had her floundering to fill in the silence, and West had to admit he found her backtracking adorable. "No, never mind," she said, slicing her hands through the air as if trying to erase her question. "Don't answer that. It's none of my business." Ellie crossed into the kitchen and looked through Nash's cupboards and refrigerator. He hoped she was looking for something to eat, and his stomach loudly agreed. "I don't mind. No, I don't have anyone like that in my life. I used to have 2 people who knew me well, but not anymore." West smiled at the way Ellie squinched her nose up as if thinking about asking him another question, but not wanting to pry. "Go ahead, ask away. I can see you want to." Ellie giggled and nodded. "Sorry, it's the lawyer in me. I guess I asked too many questions. I always have. My father said I'm relentless when it comes to getting the truth out of someone." "So, you're a lawyer?" West gasped, keeping up the pretense he knew nothing about her. "Yes, I work in town at a local firm. I'm trying to make partner, but I have a feeling that might never happen. There's a lot of politics that goes on in my office, and I still haven't proven myself." "What kind of cases do you take?" "I'm a defense attorney. I take cases which usually involve me trying to argue someone isn't guilty, although they usually are." Ellie wrinkled her nose again, making him chuckle. She was so expressive he could tell exactly what she was thinking just from her facial cues. "So you argue the case for the bad guys?" he asked. West already knew the answer to the question, but he wondered what her answer would be. Would Ellie be honest with him and own up to working with criminals, or would she defend them? "Well, I have to prove they are innocent, and if they aren't, then usually it comes out and I lose the case." She looked toward the front door as if willing Nash to walk back through. West worried he had pushed her too far, and their question and answer time was over. "What were you going to ask me?" Wes questioned. He could tell Ellie was done talking about her work and wanted to show her he was willing to play the 20 questions game for tit for tat. Sorry, what? She asked. She walked across the cozy family room from the adjoining kitchen and handed him a plate of food. Honestly, he was starving. Thanks, he said, taking one of the sandwiches she'd made for them. No problem. You were going to ask me a question. What was it? He asked, taking a bite of his food. Oh, she said around a mouthful of sandwich. I was going to ask who the two people were. He didn't know how honest to be with Ellie. She hadn't asked him any personal questions, so he didn't have to worry about giving too much away yet. But answering such a personal question honestly might cost him. They were the two people I was with, romantically. He admitted he wasn't sure why he had been blatantly honest with her, but he was. I was in a committed relationship with a man and a woman until a few years back. They decided they wanted to make our threesome a twosome, and well, I moved on. I'm sorry, that's awful. I shouldn't have pried. I don't mind, really. The last thing he wanted to do was spill his guts about his past failed relationship. Hell, he was breaking most of his rules, number one being not to get involved with a person of interest. He needed to remember that was exactly what Ellie was, a lead suspect in his current investigation. I know, right, Nina? Forgetting that might cost him the case, and he couldn't allow that. Nash came barreling through the front door, the wind chasing in after him, blowing in the snow. Ellie shivered and set her plate down to go help him. Nash handed her half his load of wood and smiled at her. Wes didn't miss the silent communication that seemed to happen between the two of them, or the way Ellie smiled back at him and nodded. Just like that, they were good, and Wes had to admit he missed having that in his life. He used to love knowing someone, or in his case, two someones, who he had an understanding with that surpassed words. He knew Ellie and Nash might deny it, but they were together in more ways than just being friends. I hope you don't mind, but I raided your fridge and made West and I a sandwich. No, not at all. I went to town yesterday to pick up supplies for the storm. We might have to stretch them to make them last, but I should have plenty. Ellie giggled. Yeah, I saw the beer in there. I'm guessing you're on the new liquid diet trend, she teased. Nash chuckled and took her load of wood from his arms. Watching the two of them together made Wes feel as if he was watching a sitcom about an old married couple. You two sure you're not more than just friends? He questioned, cocking his eyebrow at them. Of course, they both quickly denied their feelings, and after the fire was stoked, both retreated to their neutral corners. West had a feeling it was going to be a long, quiet night. He couldn't push Ellie for answers. Nash wouldn't allow it, so they sat in silence for what seemed an eternity, eating their meals and listening to the fire pop and crackle. It was almost peaceful enough to fall asleep, which might also have something to do with the fact he was dog-tired and having spent most of his day chasing the sexy little brunette who currently sat across from him up the damn mountain. He was about ready to announce he was going to get some shut-eye when Nash decided to make conversation. So, West, want to tell me why you're up on my mountain today? Nash asked. West knew his silent reprieve was too good to be true. Nash was biding his time and most likely stewing about the fact he had two unwanted guests. Well, one unwanted from the way Nashville watched Ellie all evening, one very much wanted guest. He wondered just how good Nash was at reading people because West was about to lie his ass off to maintain his cover. Sometimes his job sucked, and now was one of those times. He just hoped like hell he could be convincing. Otherwise, he wasn't sure he'd fare so well again out in the storm when Nash kicked his ass out. And that's where I'm going to stop, ladies and gents. If I have any gents left. Yes. You're just going to have to get the book. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. I'm not sure. Nina, do you remember the cost? Are you still on here? I want to say it's probably like $2.99 or something if you want to buy it. It is book 2. And I'll just say that her books get very graphic. So, if you're into all that, you might want to get them and you might want to read them. So, yeah. I'm liking it. Now we gotta go chase a 2-year-old and try to get him to sleep before I fall asleep. All right, ladies. Well, let's wrap this up. Any questions? Anybody? 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 If not, Nina, do you remember how much it was? Was it $2.99? So, alrighty. I'm going to go chase the 2-year-old. You guys have a wonderful evening. KL, if you double back and listen to this, thank you, darling, for writing such good stuff. We've got a full week next week. I got 3 new authors. 3 authors. Alan Austin, I'm doing a Christmas one for him. Ramsey Wolf, who is one of my favorite authors of all time. So it's going to be a Wednesday night. And new to me author Betty Scheffler, I believe, if I remember correctly, will be Thursday night. So, yep. Anybody who needs to get me books, go ahead and get them in. Get with Nina on the where they need to go to. She can get them. She's got my Kindle address as well as my email address. So, yep. Should be ready to go. So, you guys have a wonderful evening and happy reading. Have a good weekend.